Hello everyone, my name is Jonas Kjellberg and I'm from Reactional Music. And today we're going to check out Reactional Composer, which is our software for converting your DAW sessions into a procedural playback format, which lets it play back note by note inside your games. So first things first, here is an empty Reaper project, more or less. I have added a singular track right now that contains an instance of Serum. So Reactional Composer works with MIDI and VST3 instruments. For our system to be able to read and parse out everything from this session, we need to rename this track. So it has to be prepended with Performer. And then we can name it to whatever. So synth pluck, because I picked a pluck sound. This one, super nice. And we will now record a bit of this. So let's start. Okay, so now I have this short recorded region here. That brings me to the next point, which is that we need to define a section of the music. So let's create a region here. And this will need to be named as well. So let's name this part and A. So anything prepended with part will be parsed by Composer and converted into a section. We also need another type of marker, and that is a key marker. So key of this piece is in D minor. So basically these three items, a track prepended by Performer, some MIDI data, the region defining a section, a part, and also a marker defining the key of the piece. With those inside your session, you can actually already convert it into the reactional procedural playback format. But let's add a few more instruments. Let's rename this Performer Bass. And let's add another one. Okay, let's do this one. Let's call this Performer. And now, since this is a percussive instrument, we need to also add perk into the name. So we could have it be called, cool drums. But as long as we include perk, then the system knows that we are not wanting to transpose this instrument tonally at all. So it's going to keep its pitches. Now that's it for the most basic parts of working with Reactional inside a DAW. Now at this point I thought it was worth mentioning that housekeeping can be a bit important, so please make sure to trim all the unnecessary parts of your MIDI data. Make sure nothing is overlapping or otherwise is looking off. And if for whatever reason there were more MIDI notes outside of this region, then what you can do is actually right-click and glue this MIDI item, and then you will get rid of any extra MIDI data that might mess up the import. So I think I'm gonna duplicate this part. So now we have two different parts to go between. So I'm gonna name this part B instead and change up the MIDI some. Now you see here I've added a different type of marker prepended with chord. It's slightly different than the key marker, but the chord marker works the same way. You define which chord is in a particular part of your track, and you can have a lot of these chord markers in order to help the interactive system better fit with other types of music. So next up, we're going to start to look at stingers. Now, stingers in Reactional are short musical bursts. So first of all, we're gonna create a track, and let's rename it Stinger, and then the name of the stinger first. So like these are prepended by performer, stingers needs to be prepended by stinger. And then we need to have some kind of MIDI on here. Now you can either load up a separate VST instruments for the stinger, or, which is much better in terms of performance, use the sends and send MIDI data to one of the other tracks. So let's try a send here. Route send to synth pluck. That should be enough. Make that MIDI. You see this is sending to this track. And then we will do a quick recording of a stinger. And we will duplicate this behavior for another stinger track. Let's name this second. And I want to send this to the drums instead. So cool drums, I'll remove the synth. Now this is sending to drums. And since it's a percussive stinger, we're gonna add perk as well. Now we're gonna add some hits here. So now we have two instruments and we want to bundle them up as stingers. So let's mark this up, this selection, and we create a region. Now the other regions before were named parts, but this is going to be called stinger. And we can name this to sting 1. Let's replicate the same with the next one. And actually, let's call this sting 1 as well. Now, these two first ones have the same name. And that means that when they're parsed into Reactional Composer, they're gonna be belonging to the same stinger group. That means if we trigger the stinger called sting 1, it will randomly pick one of the two of these. And for the last one, let's name that stinger sting 2. Now, since these stingers are not in F, they're rather in D minor, let's insert a marker here, key D minor. And now the system knows that these stingers are in D minor scale. Now, another way to utilize sends is to have the different elements of a performer be split over multiple performers. So for instance, we can, let's duplicate this one. We'll remove the instrument from this. We will route this into the synth pluck. Let's call this synth pluck 2. And then we will remove the bass notes here. Same with this one. And on the bottom one, let's only have the bass notes available. And now we can, from within Composer, address these notes individually from the other one in the instrument, meaning that we could, for instance, control the velocity of only these notes or mess with them in other ways in terms of timing or pitch. Lastly, on the topic of sends, we will add a new track. And we're going to use this for reverb sending. So Reactional has a built-in reverb that you can use. And to use that, you have to call this one send and reverb. And in order for you to kind of have a sense of reverb in your DAW session, we can add whatever reverb we feel like, and a full mix there. And then I'm going to send from this track, for instance, to the send reverb. And now we'll have that feeding into this reverb channel, as you can hear there. So now this track will send to the reverb channel, and that will mean that once it has been parsed into Reactional Composer, the Reactional Reverb will get the output from this instrument sent into the reverb. Now that we're done with our composition, we want to import it into Reactional Composer. So let's open up Composer. And then we need to find our project file. If you're on a Mac, you can just grab it and drag it from here. But otherwise, you need to navigate to the folder, and then you grab your file and drop it into Reactional Composer. And now it will automatically render everything needed for procedural note-by-note playback. And this will take 20-30 seconds or so. It depends on how many instruments you have in your session. This concludes the first video in the Composer tutorial series. Stay tuned for the next one, where we will be dealing with how to actually work with Reactional Composer. Until next time.
Reactional.